Today is September the 4th, 2019. My name is Tanya Fincham. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and today we are in the Angie DeBow room in the OSU Library on campus in Stillwater to speak with Gary Sparks. And this is going to be part of our O State Stories collection, focusing a little later on about the Homecoming 2015 crash and memorial, resulting memorial from that. Gary is a 1966 architecture student graduate of OSU and was instrumental in getting the renovations done for Gallagher-Iba and Boone Pickens, the lead architect for that. And he's retired now.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
If you want to fill in anything else right there, you can, but otherwise we'll...
No, I think you did fine. That's good.
Okay. Let's begin with learning when and where you were born.
Well, I was born on July 30, 1941 in Murphy, North Carolina. My dad worked construction, building highways and dams. And at that particular time, they were building a dam for the TVA somewhere near Murphy, North Carolina. So that's where we happened to be living at the time. My mother needed to give birth to me, and we didn't stay there very long. We moved a lot. My dad, we moved quite a bit. My brother and I figured that we moved over 35 times from our birth till the time we graduated from high school. So we went to a lot of different schools all over the country. We had never lived west of the Mississippi River until 1960 is the first time I ever came west of the Mississippi River. And I had graduated from high school at Walker County High in Jasper, Alabama. That's next summer, my folks moved to Sand Springs, Oklahoma to work on a dam outside of Sand Springs called Keystone Dam. And he had my mother wrote my brother and I and asked us if we would like to come to Oklahoma for the summer to work and spend some time together. I hadn't really decided what I was going to do. I hadn't planned on going to college, but I wanted to spend the summer with my brother, so I said, yes, I'd like to come out there. Never been out to Oklahoma. So I got a Greyhound bus ticket out of Atlanta, Georgia, to come to Tulsa, Oklahoma. That would have been the summer of 1960. And when I got here, there was supposed to be 2 jobs on the dam, and there's actually only 1 job opening. And my brother was going to college at the University of Alabama. So he really needed to work this summer and earn money to get back to college. And since I wasn't planning on going to college, I said, you take the job and I'll find something else to do. And what I found to do wasn't very much fun. It was baling hay, loading it on a truck, taking it to the barn, unloading it and stacking it with 2 other guys. And one of those fellows happened to be a student at Oklahoma State University. And one day I went to his house, and when I was at his house, I saw these architectural projects that he'd been doing as a student at OSU. And when I saw those, I knew immediately that that's what I wanted to do. So I asked him, I said, where are you learning how to do this? This is incredible. And he told me he was going to Oklahoma State University. And I said, where's that? I had no idea. And he told me Stillwater. So I came to Stillwater to see about enrolling, and I took the test, and I did horrible because I really didn't have a very good educational background. Moving that much, I don't feel like I got much of an education. I certainly wasn't prepared for college. So the advisor asked me if I'd like to take the test again. I said, no, it won't do any good because I won't know the answers the next time either. And he said, well, are you a resident of Oklahoma? And I said, yes. So he said, well, we will accept you because you're a resident of Oklahoma, but you're going to have to keep a 2 or 2.5 grade point average to stay in school, otherwise you're kind of on probation. So and then he asked me what I wanted to major in. I said architecture, and he said, son, there's no way you're going to make it through architecture. He said, that's one of the most difficult programs on campus. And with these scores that you got, there's just no way you can do that. He said, what's your backup plan? I said, I don't have a backup plan. My backup plan is architecture. That's the only plan I've got. And all I need is a chance. Just give me a chance, and I bet you I can do it. So OSU gave me the chance to become an architect, and I've always felt like I owe Oklahoma State a debt just for giving me that opportunity. And I struggled. It was hard. Took some of the courses a couple of times, and but I was determined to get that degree. And it's a 5-year program, and I got through in 6 years. But you know, I made it, and that's all that mattered. And so then that's kind of I met my wife here on a blind date, and we've been married 53 years. She's from Bartlesville, Missouri. And after we graduated, we went to Atlanta. I had a job there, and I was going to go to Georgia Tech to get a master's degree. And she was teaching in elementary school. And we'd been married about 3 months. And I came home from work or class, I don't remember which, and had a letter there from my draft board saying, welcome to the Army, or, you know, you need to go get your physical. So I went down to the Atlanta draft board and took my physical. And in November of 66, I was inducted into the Army. And we'd been married by that time, probably 4 or 5 months. And she came back to Oklahoma, and I went to basic and AIT training. And then everybody was being sent to Vietnam. So they just drilled that into our heads that we were all going to go to Vietnam. When my orders came, I was sent to Germany, which was a shock. I never even thought about going to anywhere except Vietnam. And I went to Germany and spent 2 years in the Army. She came over, was able to stay there in Germany with me for a while. We lived downtown Heilbronn, Germany. They didn't have housing for privates, so we were fortunate to find an apartment. And came back. I got out of the Army, and we came back to Tulsa to make that our home. And that's where I got my training and passed the test to get my architectural license. And in 1978, started my own practice. And it was a struggle there for a while. We had 2 or 3 changes in the company, but I finally, in 1986, really felt like I had settled down and we were going to be able to survive and have our own company and our own firm. And so the rest is as much as you want to know. I can keep going, or
Oh, you're fine. If you want to keep going, that's fine.
yeah, I can bring it on up. In 1986, we started the company,
What was it called?
Gary Sparks Companies.
Okay.
And we struggled for about 6 or 7 years. The economy was really bad. There was double-digit inflation. A lot of architects were leaving Oklahoma and trying to go someplace else to find work. But we just stuck it out. She had a daycare home, took care of 6 little kids, and that we really basically survived off that. I found a couple of projects that kind of helped us keep going. But in 1995, I was coming back from Stillwater. I'd been down here to do some work with the interior design department. They asked me to come down and critique some of the students' work. So I had been down to Stillwater. I was going back to Tulsa, and I was listening to a sports radio show. and the sports guy said, the latest news out of Stillwater is the university and the city of Stillwater are going together to build a new arena west of town. And when I heard that, I almost drove the truck into the ditch, because I thought, what, an abandoned Gallagher-Iba? That'd be horrible. To build an arena off campus is really not a good idea. And we got a great arena, it's just too small and it's outdated. So I started thinking about how that could be renovated and expanded. And then when I got back to the office, I met with some people, and I came up with this idea of raising the roof. And I've got a book that I've written that describes those 14 years of what it was like to design and see Gallagher-Iba and Boone Pickens Stadium renovated and expanded. It's called Game Changer. And I just wanted to document those 14 years. But those were great years, and had a great career, had some great clients. Was very blessed. God did miraculous things with me and the firm, and blessed way beyond anything I ever deserved or expected. So it's been a good career and a good life, and I've enjoyed it. And OSU is a very, very, very special place for me and my wife. We both graduated from here, and we've been to hundreds of events on campus since we graduated.
Where did you go on your blind date?
We went to a basketball game at Gallagher. At that time it was called Gallagher Hall. And went to a basketball game, and then the second date, we went back to Gallagher Hall to watch the OOHRP wrestling match. And I can't tell you, I have no idea how many events we've been to at Gallagher-Iba Arena and Boone Pickens Stadium. Hundreds.
Well, since they've raised the roof, do you have a favorite spot in the arena?
Well, we do. It's not anything spectacular. We like to sit across well, my wife is a huge basketball fan. She loves basketball. So she kind of picks a seat. She wanted to sit across from the bench, the OSU bench, so she can see the players and the coaches and how they react and what goes on during the game. And it's just a little bit north of midcourt,
okay,
up on the upper section. It's like section C or something. But yeah, that's where we like to sit. So,
do you remember where you sat on the first
I do,
day?
yeah, I do.
Is it close
It was
to
in
that?
the student section down.
Oh,
So,
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was closer to the floor. Yeah, I can still remember that. That was and I knew after 3 or 4 dates that this girl was pretty special, and I better try to latch onto her and keep her. And she's endured a lot because I'm a risk taker, and she's very conservative.
And you want to say her name
Jerry
and her maiden name?
Mornhenweg. She was German descent. Her parents were school teachers at Bartlesville, and she grew up as a school teacher kid.
How did she end up at OSU?
Well, her mother went to OSU,
Okay.
and I think she just always assumed this is where she would go. Her mother was a Zeta Tau Alpha, and she was a Zeta Tau Alpha. So I guess it's a legacy or something. And yeah, her mother and her dad were very special people. I just really loved them. They were great to me, great to us, and great people. So,
Did you get married before you graduated?
we got married May 28th, 1966, and we graduated that summer. So we went to summer school together, and we lived across just north of Gallagher-Iba Arena in an apartment building that's been torn down. So when they started building the athletic village, they tore that building that we lived in down. It was a dumpy old building.
But good memory.
But great memories. We loved it. Yeah.
Gosh, at that point, you had no idea what was coming down the pike and coming
No,
around
I mean,
back to this.
no, we didn't. I was always super optimistic. I just always assumed that I didn't know I couldn't do something. I just figured I could do it somehow, some way. And I always felt like hard work would overcome a lot of other things that you might not have socially or politically, connections and those kinds of things. Uh, but I really wanted to go back to Atlanta because I love the city. I love the South. And Atlanta's always been kind of a recession-proof city to some degree. Seems like they've been able to avoid a lot of ups and downs like we've had in Oklahoma. So I really wanted to go back, and then I really thought the idea of getting a master's degree in architecture would be pretty cool. And but that didn't work out when I got my draft notice. And so we were in Germany and getting ready to come back to the States. I just asked her, I said, where would you like to live? And she said, Tulsa. She wanted to be close to her folks in Bartlesville. So I said, it really doesn't matter to me. I'll do fine wherever we wind up. And so Tulsa was great. I didn't have a problem. I thought that would be a neat city to live in. I didn't think we would spend our entire life in Tulsa. I thought we'd be there for a while and then we might go someplace else. But the way it worked out, Tulsa was good to us. And it's a great place to raise kids. And we got a lot of good friends. I've got a good group of people we know from church, and we've just been friends for 40 years or whatever.
Well, if you'd moved 35 times before, you were ready to.
Yeah, actually, settling down wasn't all bad.
Yeah.
It was pretty nice. And
were your parents still in Sand Springs at that time?
No, they didn't stay in Sand Springs. They never stayed any place very long. My dad was real restless. He for several reasons, just had a hard time staying put.
Was he surprised when you decided to go to college, since you hadn't planned to?
Well, yeah, they were. I mean, everybody was surprised because I had never shown any interest in academics. I really didn't. I bet you my scores would have indicated I probably had a 10th grade education or something. And because I went to 4 schools in 1 year. And my freshman year, of high school, we lived in Paducah, Kentucky, which at that time wasn't a very big place. And we moved 4 times living in Paducah, Kentucky. It's just crazy. It's insane to think about our childhood. My brother and I talk about that now. And it's like, what in the world were they thinking? But he had an 8th grade education. I don't think my mother graduated from high school. Mm-hmm. So education wasn't that important to them. They didn't put a lot of emphasis on that. And my brother went on to have an incredible career academically. He had a PhD in neuropsychology or something. I don't know, can't even say what it is. But, and did tremendous things in his field. And so we both look back and say, how did we do that, coming from that environment and moving so many times? I mean, we literally lived out of a station wagon. Basically, we would move into a place and he would find a job working on construction, and we might live in a motel for 2 or 3 weeks before we found a rental house or a condo or someplace we could live. And then I went to one school for 3 days. I went and checked in one day, went the second day, and checked out the third day. So, yeah, it was a crazy, crazy childhood. But I think it made us, my brother and I talked about it some, and I think it gave us, for me, what it did more than anything is I never was intimidated by anybody. After going through that and going to all those different schools, meeting all those different kids, all those different teachers, when I go someplace, people are people. I don't see social status, political status, color, any of that stuff. It's just a person's a person. And they're not any better than me, I'm not any better than them. And I just feel like we're equals, whatever the situation, because that's kind of what I had to do to survive that childhood. And so it helped me later on in life just interact with people. And so I think that was a positive from it. And new situations just don't impact me the way they probably do a lot of people. I just can accept stuff that I think really bothers a lot of people maybe. I just accept it and move on. And I don't ever look back. No, I don't have a rear view mirror. The disadvantage, the thing that, if there was a downside, it was that I never let anybody get close to me, because it was so painful to leave if I got to know the people very well. So I never had any close friends. And even after I got married, Jerry and I, it took me a long time just to know how to bond with her and do the normal things that people do with talking about how they feel and that kind of stuff was foreign to me. And so it took me a while to become normal in that respect. But that's really the biggest downside, is I never was good at making friends and staying in contact with people, because once I left, and I never looked back. And but there were a lot of positives that came out of it too.
And you stayed down in Stillwater the longest, your first longest stint.
Right. When I was here for 6 years, this became home. This was the first home I ever really had. And I thought about that a lot. I planted some pretty deep roots here in Stillwater, because I never lived any place for 6 years. And even though, I mean, I'd go someplace for the summer and work construction, then I'd come back and finish up another year here. But this was home. This is the closest thing to home I'd ever had. And I got to meet some people here. I really did have some, 3 of my roommates I still stay in touch with.
Okay.
You know, all these years later. And one of them got a PhD in engineering, one's a veterinary medicine, and the other's an architect. So 2 of us were architects. We had a veterinarian and we had an engineer.
I have to ask, did you ever go back to the person that said you should have a plan B?
No, because I would like to, but I have no idea who that would be.
You don't remember his name?
I'm not the type of person that would even ever thought about doing that until a lot later. I thought, it'd be interesting to have a conversation with that person, but I have no idea who it was. I just remember going into his office. I sat down across from his desk, and he was looking at my scores, and I'm sure they were horrible. I don't have any idea what they were. I guess it was an ACT test. I don't know. I don't know what they gave back in 1960, but he just looked at that, and he looked at me, and he said, these scores are not very good. And I said, yeah, I know that. I'm sure that's true. And I remember asking me if I wanted to take it again. I said, no, I don't want to go through it again, because if I took it tomorrow, I'm still not going to know the answers. I'm not going to learn those answers overnight. It is what it is. And that's when he said, well, what do you want to major in? When I said architecture, he almost fell out of his chair. Like, there's no way.
He was probably an admissions officer.
Yeah, or I don't know if they had, what do they call them, counselors or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if
they have a name for those people, but I don't know what his title was. But I mean, he meant well. I think he was trying to give me good advice, but you can't measure somebody's heart. That's the one thing you can't measure, is how want to. How bad does somebody want something? And I think there were like 100 of us that started in freshman architectural design class. There was like 10 or 15 of us that graduated. So it was a lot of people dropped out. It was kind of an endurance course. But I just wanted it. And
Do you have a favorite professor from those?
Yeah, there was a guy named, well, there was two or three. We had one named Alex Notaros, and he was Greek. Fantastic professor. Dr. Stevens, I guess he was Dr. Stevens. I don't know if he was a doctor or not. That may not have. Mr. Stevens was lived here in Stillwater, and there's a Mr. Irby. His son, I guess he owns this sound place here in Stillwater.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it. They make speakers for cars and stuff.
Kickers?
What is that?
Kicker?
Yeah, Kicker. Yeah, that's his son, I think. He was really, really good professor. There was a Mr. Cunningham that was really, really good. We had a great group of professors. Really, really good. I had my freshman English class. I remember one of the first assignments was we were supposed to write a paper about our life story. And I had never been very good at that. And my English was horrible. My writing was horrible. I knew all that. But I really worked hard at trying to write this paper to turn in the next day for this English class. And so I turned it in. And I thought, I did pretty good. I thought it was a pretty good paper. And I don't know, a couple of days later, the teacher said she was going to read one example that was really, really good and one that was really bad. So I'm kind of sitting there not thinking too much about it. I knew mine wasn't going to be a good one, and I didn't think it was going to be a bad one. But so she read the good one, and sure enough, it wasn't mine. And then she read the bad one. Well, it was mine. And I was really embarrassed. I thought, wow, I didn't think it was that bad. It wasn't good, but I didn't think it was the worst. And then she said, I'd like for this student to stay. After class, I want to talk to this person. So everybody else left, and I stayed in the class there. She said, Mr. Sparks, is this the best you can do? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, well, do you have to take this class? And I said, well, I wouldn't be in here if I didn't, because I'm not that good in English. She said, well, if you're going to pass this course, if you're going to make a C in here, you got a lot of work to do. And I said, well, I don't mind working. Just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. And she said, well, you got to be here every day. You cannot miss a class. And I'm going to give you extra homework to do. And I'm going to give you tests, separate tests throughout the semester to see how you're progressing. And then at the end of the semester, we'll see if you have a passing grade or not. I said, you just do whatever you need to do. I'll do the work. And so she did. And at the end of the semester, I got a C. So, I think the professors really took an interest in me. I think they saw I was a special case, maybe. And they, especially in architecture, as I went on up, become an upperclassman, I think some of them realized that I was an overachiever, maybe, and they were willing to help me be successful. So, OSU just was a great place. It was just an awesome experience. The university, all the professors were very good to me. The town was great. Lived in a lot of dumps, but that's all I could afford. I did live in the basement of the Wesley Foundation one semester, and for free. And that's an interesting story, but they just built a new facility, which I was the architect for. Sparks Reed did the architecture on it.
Okay.
So that was kind of neat to go back and design that building for them. And it turned out it's really a nice facility. But I just don't have any negatives about OSU or Stillwater. It's just a super experience for me. And I just can't say enough about how positive the whole 6 years, and since then, it's just been fantastic.
Being able to finance 6 years was a challenge, it sounds like.
Yes, I had to make enough money in the summer, but my dad said when I told him I wanted to go to college, he said, we're not going to pay for it. You're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. We're not doing it. He said, I will try to get you a good summer job on construction every summer. And he did, except for that one summer. And that's the summer when I came back, I didn't have enough money to make it through this semester. And I was able to find this place at the Wesley Foundation down in the basement. They let me live there, and all I had to do was lock it up at night, open it up in the morning, straighten up the furniture, take out trash, and I got free rent. That really helped, but I could usually make it from my summer savings till about February, March, and then I'd start running out of money, and I would usually find some way to earn enough money in town here. I would serve meals at the girls' dorm, and then I could eat a meal afterwards for free. That helped me get through. I did house plans for Hope Lumber or some lumber company here in Stillwater. They paid me $50 a set of house plans. So I did as many of those as I could to help pay my way through. And then I worked for an interior designer that lived here in Stillwater named June Gillum. And I did house plans for her while I was a student, and made a little bit of money. So I usually found a way to make enough money to get me from February, March through May if I ran short.
Where there's a will, there's a way, it sounds like, from your standpoint.
But I just never assumed I couldn't do it. It never even entered my mind that I couldn't do it. So, yeah, it was good. It's been good. And my wife and I been married. We had 3 daughters.
Any of them come here?
One came here, Jill. My middle daughter is a graduate of OSU, and she actually was the interior designer for the most of everything you see at Gallagher-Iba and Boone Pickens Stadium.
Okay, so you got to work with her.
She worked in the firm, and we worked together. And that was really neat. Got to spend a lot of time with her. It's good experience. The other two, one lives in Tulsa, one lives in Kansas City. And together they have 12 children, so we have 12 grandkids.
Keeps you busy.
It does. It's fun.
Well, whose idea was it to leave a chair for the Iba's chair?
I don't know. I don't know where that came from, but it was I'm glad they did that, but I don't know. I guess somebody in the athletic department.
Wasn't your daughter's? I thought maybe if she's interior, then it could be.
No, I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
I talk about in the book how we came up with the seating capacity for that in the football stadium. And there was a fellow in the business department, John Moen, who was involved in doing a study for what the demand for tickets might be to determine how much seating capacity we would be realistic. And his numbers were super high, and realistically, it would have been difficult to have built the building as big as the demand supported. So we backed up and built 13,611 seats.
It seems to have worked out quite well.
Yeah, and when it's full, and it will be again, I think it's just a matter of time. We're going to get back and be the program we used to be.
Of the two, which was the most challenging?
Oh, Gallagher-Iba by far.
Was it?
Boone Pickens Stadium was challenging in a lot of ways. It was very, very challenging, especially tying the west end zone into the north and south side. There was quite a discrepancy in the seating bowl, and we had to join the two and do a lot of tricky things. There were a lot of tricky things involved in Boone Pickens Stadium, a lot of tricky things, and it took a lot longer because it was done in 3 phases. So it was a very, very difficult renovation expansion. But Gallagher-Iba that had never been done before. I mean, when we first started, and I presented the idea to Terry Don Phillips, he said, are you sure you can do this? And I had already visited with some people, and I knew we could do it. He said, we're going to have to keep playing basketball, wrestling, in that arena while this construction's going on. I really hadn't thought about that, but there wasn't any place else to hold those events. So we had to figure out a way to keep playing in the arena while this is going on. And then they obviously wanted to save the floor, because that's a 1938 maple floor, original floor. And I couldn't guarantee that something wouldn't happen to that. Could have had a beam drop on it or something. There was just a lot of things that we had to deal with that had never been dealt with. Building the exterior and the seating bowl, enclosing that, and coming inside and taking the old roof structure out after we'd completed and dried in the new. And do all that between seasons, and it was challenging. Manhattan Construction did an incredible job of doing that project. As a contractor, did a good job.
Some long days.
Long days, long nights. And I kept track of how many trips I made. I made over 2,000 trips down here during those 14 years. Just
They should have given you a park pass.
should have given me a car.
That's true.
So I wore out 2 or 3. That's a lot of trips.
Are they orange, your cars?
No. I never owned an orange one, I don't think. But I can't remember, but I don't think so, no. But, it was good. It's all good.
And the arena was opened or dedicated in 2001?
Yeah.
And then the football was 2009. 2001, that was about the same time as the plane crash.
Yeah.
It was 2001. I think that's right, isn't it?
I think it was actually maybe 2000. I'm
Okay.
not sure about that. I think it would have been.
So was the memorial, remember the 10 memorial in your plans? Probably not.
Actually, that crash happened. Yeah, probably. I think it may have been 2000. Dr. Halligan asked me if I would design, because we were in the middle of getting started on the football stadium project, and the crash occurred. It delayed starting. They were in the middle of actually selecting the architect to do the stadium. When the plane crash happened, that put everything on hold, and then we started back up that selection process. And after they selected my firm to do that, it was Sparks Companies at that time, they selected us to do it. And then Dr. Halligan asked me if I would design the memorial in Colorado, Strasburg, Colorado, which I said, sure, I would love to be honored to do that. And then he asked if we would do the one at Gallagher-Iba, the memorial there. And my daughter, Jill, had a lot to do with that memorial in Gallagher-Iba. So we did both of those, and very, very special projects. I spent a lot of time in Colorado going out and overseeing the construction. It's not a big project if you, on the scale of a lot of things that we've done, but it was an important project to the OSU family and the families of the people that were killed in the plane crash. So it took on a totally different meaning and importance than some of the other stuff. But we had a lot of support from the people in Strasburg, a little town in the community, and I think it turned out nice, very respectful of the people and their families. each of the family members had an opportunity to write something about each person, personalize that, and then we engraved that in the granite with a photo of the person. And the one in Colorado's, it's out right there at the site where the plane crash occurred.
When you were designing both of those, do research go to other places or figure out what others had done in a similar circumstances, or just,
We probably should have, looking back, but we didn't. I mean, it was, we did have the people in Strasbourg review the designs, and knowing that needed to be very low maintenance because it's out where it does not going to get a lot of maintenance, but there are people that come off the interstate and drive out there to see it. So you need to be able to maintain it, need to be durable, and it needed to be something that's not, one of the things that the people in Strasbourg said is don't make it a tall monument because people out here have rifles and they're going to see it as a target practice. So we intentionally kept it low to the ground. But no, I really didn't do that much research. I did more for the one here in Stillwater and looking at what some other people had done around the country for this one, for homecoming.
I guess we need to segue into that then.
Yeah, well,
that's a good segue. That's a good segue. Where were you on that day? Do you recall where you were?
Yeah, I was in for the one here in Stillwater. I was in Tulsa, and when I heard about it, I couldn't believe it. I thought, no, there's just no way that could happen. I just couldn't believe it. And of course, it was followed it on the news and just kept track of it. And I immediately, well, not immediately, but shortly after that, Scott Petty, when he started writing his book, Stillwater Strong, I reached out to him and I said, I don't know what the city or university or anybody's planning, but if they want to do a memorial of some sort, I would be glad to volunteer our time and help with that. Because I think there's something about doing that is significant, I think, to the community, and it's just a good way to remember those people. So you just don't want to forget what happened and pay respect to the families that were involved in that. So he said, yeah, he would love to have a memorial in Stillwater, and he would get back to me when they were better organized and knew what they wanted to do. I just said, well, just remember, I'd be glad to help. And so I think it was probably, I know we started meeting in November of 2015.
Okay, pretty soon after.
Yeah, maybe even before November, but I know we started meeting in November. Just with the city and 2 or 3 people here in town to talk about is just something that they wanted to do, and where would you put it, and how you going to pay for it, and so forth and so on. So I sat in on a lot of those meetings. I didn't have a lot of input into some of that, but we did look at a couple of different sites, and the city was very supportive. They were great to work with, the local merchants. Great to work with the Stillwater Strong committee, made up of, I don't even know who all the organizations were, not being from Stillwater, but I think the chamber was involved and some others in raising the funds, a fundraiser, and they actually were given permission by the university to pass the plate or buckets at one of the football games to raise money, and they raised quite a bit of money at that event. But we try to keep the cost down to a minimum because there really wasn't an entity to step up and pay or spend a lot of money on that. But we wanted it to be nice, elegant, permanent, low maintenance, but significant. People could go by that, near that site where that occurred. They would see that and they could go over and read about what happened and read about the people that were impacted in that event. So.
And it's an orange and blue ribbon.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about choosing that design.
Well, the city of Stillwater had kind of embraced that design
Already.
prior to either, I don't know, prior to the event or right after the event. I'm not sure. I think they already had that ribbon as part of their logo or whatever. Or maybe that became, somebody came up with that. Scott Petty would know the history of that better than I would, but so when we got to talking about the design, it just seemed like obviously that's, how can you improve on that? That's the perfect design for it. So my job from a design standpoint was pretty easy. We did want to, doing some research, it was one idea that came across that we wanted to incorporate, but it just got so complicated that we couldn't. We wanted to have that opening in the ribbon position so that when the very time each year of the date of that event, the sun would shine through that opening and land on a plaque on the ground that would highlight the people that had been killed in that crash. But it just got to be kind of a difficult thing to position because of the site and whatever. So we abandoned that. And we had a company in Tulsa that built the ribbon, did a great job, painted it with some special paint. And Lambert Construction, Mark Lambert, took that on as a project that he just really wanted to embrace and make sure it happened correctly, and donated a lot of time and energy, as did a lot of people, to get that built. But yeah, we had a great group from the city, and then Mark and Scott were both good. Scott really was kind of the driver of the project. He would call the meetings, make sure everybody got emails and knew when to meet, what were the agenda, and then the meeting notes afterwards. And he had contact with the families and other people. So he was kind of the coordinator, overall coordinator of the project. But Mark really did a good job of making sure that it got built and got used good materials, and they used good craftsmanship. It was really excellent. And the lighting and all that was, we just helped design the features and the location and help them think through a lot of that stuff. But most of the credit really needs to go to the people here in town. They did a great job of putting that together.
Well, it's similar to what you were talking about in Colorado with a quote or description or something about the people themselves, the individuals.
Yeah, and that's important, I think, otherwise people really won't know much about those people unless you have something there that tells about them. And so, yeah, that was important. And, you know, I just think that history, if we don't document that, we're going to lose history. Once people are gone, the history's gone if you don't document it some way. And some things need not to be lost. They need to preserve the history. That's the beauty of what you're doing with this, is you're preserving history by interviewing people and having them tell stories. And you know, it may not seem like it means a lot right now, but all the people that have had a part of Oklahoma State University and you can get their stories, and have that preserved is huge. It's just huge. Because once they're gone, the story's gone. And you got to document that. Because someday people are going to want to know, how did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Who was involved in that? And they're not going to know if you don't document. Because there'll be, like on Gallagher-Iba and Boone Pickens Stadium, I'm amazed at how many people will come up to me and ask me a question about, did such and such happen a certain way, or how did that come about? And they've got their own version of that, but I don't even know where they came up with that version. I'm thinking, how did you come up with that? That has nothing to do with reality. But it's just like the rumor game. It just starts spreading, and by the time you get to the end of the line, it's like nothing like what the original story was. So.
Well, I mean, the memorials connect generations. It's so similar to what you're saying. 50 years from now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one, the homecoming one, is very much in the public sphere.
Yeah.
And remember the 10, you actually have to go inside of the building, right. Make an effort to go in and see.
Right. Yeah, and especially the one in Colorado, it's really off the beaten path. But I would encourage people to take the time. I know it's always hard because you're trying to get someplace on a deadline, you're trying to get back or whatever, but it's probably an extra hour out of your way to go see the one in the one in Colorado.
Well, of the three, was one more challenging than the other, or?
Well, the one in Colorado was pretty challenging. Because all the granite stuff was put together, and the panels were put together in Tulsa, and we had to make sure everything fit, and then shipped it to Colorado, trucked it up there, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, and there wasn't much of a construction crew to build this. And I was actually out there mixing cement a couple of times, just helping them place some of the stuff that went into the memorial, because they didn't have much labor. And so I would help with that. Another guy, John Houck, who is a Stillwater guy and works for the university, he and I went out there several times together to work on that. But yeah, that was probably the most challenging. The one in the arena, Gallagher-Iba, came together pretty well. It wasn't that challenging. And then the one here in Stillwater for the homecoming was challenging in several aspects, but one aspect was trying to do something really nice and permanent without spending a ton of money, because there just wasn't a lot of money for that project. So the city really came in and helped a lot. They had the land. I think they did the landscaping. They did a lot of their staff helped with coming up with the landscape plan, and I think they did a lot of the electrical work for the lighting. And so they were big help.
And for those who might not know, it's on northwest corner of Hall of Fame and Maine. Is that geographically?
It's Hall of Fame.
It's on the west, and it's on the north side of the street.
Yeah.
Of Hall of Fame and Maine.
Yeah, Hall of Fame is running east-west. Maine is running north-south. So this is on the northwest corner of that intersection.
Okay.
Yeah. It's actually catty corner of the street from where the crash actually occurred, I think.
Were you coming to the game that day?
No, we weren't going to be able to make it that day. For some reason, I can't remember why, but we were not going to be able to make their game. Some family thing that was going on.
Were you at the dedication for the
Yes.
memorial? I guess you were right off for all three of them.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that was very, and the families on the, I didn't work that closely with the families for the one in Stillwater for homecoming, but on the one in Colorado and here in Gallagher-Iba, I met with some of the family members, and then we took the wording of what message that they wanted on the panels for their loved one, and made sure that fit on there and and the composition was right, and the image of the person was engraved, and all that was very important that that all fit and looked good. So, I don't know, the one, I think the one in Colorado, that crash, I mean, it's just so devastating. They both were very different, very, very different. And, but yeah, although I remember I was in Kansas City visiting my daughter up there when that happened, and I heard about it. I just couldn't believe it, could not believe it. Of course, same for the homecoming one too. Yeah, those are tough things to go through as a community, as a university. It has a huge impact on it. But it also makes you realize how important it is to live every day to the fullest and let the people around you know you love them, you care about them. And because you never know, you just don't know.
And then the third memorial, you don't know that you had anything necessarily you weren't involved with the third one. And it's similar, very public sphere too.
But I talk about Coach Budke in the book because he was an integral part of the renovation of the men's and women's locker rooms in Gallagher-Iba. That's a neat story. He was a very, very classy person. I don't know, something about him. I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but I spent quite a bit of time making sure that we got that project done the way everybody wanted it done. And I was just very impressed with what a class guy he was. Just sincere, humble, honest, caring individual is what came across. But he had definite opinions about things, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. He was looking out for his team, players, coaches, assistant coaches. Great guy. I wish I had gotten to know him better, but yeah, he was special.
Well, where that particular monument is, what was going to be in that space before, when you were designing just the gathering area lobby?
In Gallagher-Iba?
Yeah, just
it
the
was
lobby.
Just lobby space.
Just lobby. And then Heritage Hall, was that for the museum part of the arena?
Well, the museum, and again, I talk about that in the book, but how that came about was I was walking through when Terry Don became the athletic director. He wanted a tour of the facilities, and we started with the arena, and then we went through the arena, and then we went over to the football building, the two-story building. But that was outdoor. I mean, there was a walkway between Gallagher-Iba and the two-story football building. So you walked between those buildings, you looked up, you saw the sky. And it wasn't until we encapsulated Gallagher-Iba, we included the two-story football building and made that part of the complex. So it all became one building. When we did that, they enclosed that walkway space. But when we were walking through, we went into the two-story football building, and the Heisman Trophy was sitting there in the corner of, next to the elevator, and a water fountain, and the restrooms, and the fire alarm panel. And it was just stuck over in the corner. And Terry Doc said, Gary, what is that? I said, that's a Heisman Trophy. And he said, how many of those does Oklahoma State have? I said, why we just have one? And he said, isn't this the most prominent place you can find to put the one Heisman Trophy that you have? And it hit me, what he was saying is, we don't cherish and embrace our greatness. We don't have any way of showing the public what we've accomplished in athletics, is the point he was trying to make. And I said, yeah, I get your point. He said, we got to fix that. You got a great tradition here. Athletic tradition is incredible. And you're not showing it to the public or recruits or fans or anybody. We got to have a place that we can showcase the OSU athletic accomplishments. And he said, you need to find a place to do that, someplace in this project. So I began thinking about that, and I realized that once we enclose that area, that would be a place we might be able to do that. It worked out pretty good.
It's nice.
And he wanted to do men's, women's, all sports in that space. So it turned out pretty good.
It's nice. I think it was a nice afterthought, huh?
Yeah.
That worked out.
But it's interesting to me that sometimes it takes an outsider to come in and help jog you a little bit about, we get so accustomed to things the way they are, we don't think they can be any different or any better. And he came in and immediately saw that, man, we're not taking advantage of what we've done, our greatness. We need to change that. And his wife, Harriet, was adamant that we start wearing orange. At that time, everybody pretty much wore white or black to all the events. And she said, no, orange. You need to be wearing orange. That shows up on TV better. You need to be proud of the orange. So they started requiring all the athletic department staff to wear orange on Fridays, maybe. And then they just really promoted that throughout every way they could, that when you come to an OSU event, you need to be wearing orange. And they were the first people I know of that ever really promoted that.
I wonder, because we're still encouraged to wear it on Fridays.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was neat that we started doing that. Now I'm not sure I think we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. I don't know that we embrace that quite as much as we did back in the early 2000s.
And they've introduced gray.
Gray, and we're getting a little bit more black and white. But orange is, if you want to be seen on TV, if you want to really light the place up, black isn't going to do it.
Black's not enough.
White really doesn't do it. It's orange that does it. So, a lot of people say they don't look good in orange. Well, they probably don't look any better than any other color either. They just use that as an excuse. They look great in orange. But everybody looks good in orange, in my opinion.
Especially during homecoming.
Especially during
Especially
at athletic events.
Yeah. Well, if you take those off of campus, Is there another place on campus you like that would come up to the top? Not considering those two, because I'm sure that would be at the top of your list.
Oh, you mean building facility wise?
Yeah.
I think this is not the answer you may be expecting, but Old Central is pretty special. It's a place. I mean, that began about history, and the fact that we've preserved that. And you know, I like the idea that you try to preserve buildings if you can, and enhance them and expand them or renovate them. I'm a little partial to the architectural building.
I wondered.
I'm glad that we've saved it. It used to be the Armory, where ROTC had most of their functions. There was a rifle range down in the basement. And actually, that's the, somebody said that actually there was a cafeteria that we may have played basketball in originally, but I think the first real basketball arena was in that building. It had a swimming pool in there at one time, a rifle range downstairs, a gym, and I'm glad they kept that building and turned it into the School of Architecture.
Is that where your classes were?
No. I was actually, most of our classes were in, gosh, what's the name of it? Gunderson.
Okay.
It was a education building, actually, and we had the top floor. We had some classes in the basement of the classroom building near the student union. Had a few classes there. Had a lot of classes in the engineering building. And then right as I was leaving, they got the new engineering building, new at that time. And we got some space in it and moved out of Gunderson. But Gunderson was just perfect for an architecture building. It was old, grungy, you couldn't do anything to it, you couldn't hurt it. And we had paint and all kinds of art stuff that we were using. So you didn't have to worry about spilling something on the floor or whatever.
And those 10 that finally finished, were any of them women? Your 10 architects, students?
The Gunderson?
No, when you graduated, you said you started with 100 and there were only 10.
Oh, I think
10
there was
people.
only like 10 or 15 of us that graduated.
And any of those women? Any of those
You
10 or
know,
15?
that's a good question. We had in the freshman, we had 3 or 4 women in our group. We kind of went through as a herd. Some would get ahead, some would get behind, some stayed on track. But I remember 3 or 4 women in that. And of course, they were better than the guys. But no, we had 2. You could halfway through architecture, or in the second year, you could decide whether you wanted to go into architectural engineering or just pure architecture. And the ones that were probably the decision, most people made the decision based on whether they really had a love for the sciences, math, that kind of stuff. They would go into engineering, and if they had more of a passion for the art and the artistic side, they would go into the pure architecture.
Which is the route you went.
Yeah. But a lot of those girls, a lot of those women seemed like they went more into the engineering side, which is kind of interesting. Because they would go their direction for 2 or 3 years, and then at the end we came back together for one final design class the last semester. It was a 7-hour course. I remember 539 the number, and you were there, you lived in that building that semester practically. I think it was a 7-hour course. Yeah, but the women were, I think most of them went the engineering route.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you spend much time in this library?
In the library?
In the library.
I did. I spent a lot of time here, especially after I met Jerry, and we would come over here and study together. By the time I met her, I was pretty much just focused on my majors, my courses that were part of the major. I'd gotten through a lot of the English and that kind of stuff. And, but I was still taking some things like calculus and some of that kind of stuff. But so we would come over here still doing architectural history, which you had this, what I'm trying to say is so much of our time was spent in Gunderson drawing, but we still had, and what made it kind of hard for architects, to me, what made it hard was the architects were taking art classes and we were competing against art majors. That was their whole focus. And then we would take engineering classes, we were competing against engineering majors. And we were kind of in between. We were part artist, part engineering. And I think that made it harder for me. I don't know about everybody else. But I would come over here with her and study my math and architectural history and some of those kind of things. And then she would come, a lot of the guys that had girlfriends would come over to Gunderson and pull up a chair and sit next to us while we were doing our projects, drawing and doing the renderings and all that kind of stuff. They would sit there and study or talk to us and keep us company. So, yeah.
You had the artistic side of things.
Yeah, I was much stronger in the arts than I was in the engineering.
Well, the person that introduced you to architecture,
Jerry Halcomb.
Did he go on to do?
He went on and had a great career in Dallas.
So he left the state.
Yeah, he had a great career. He was a part owner in a company that did predominantly church work, huge churches, mega churches. And we actually teamed up on one project together later on. But we didn't stay, we still on Facebook follow each other a little bit, but yeah, he went on and did great, had a great career.
I mean, when you look back at turning points in your life, he was a major one.
Yeah. There's so many little things that you do that seem so insignificant at the time, but they're life-changing. They're just totally life-changing. And you don't realize it until 10, 20, 30 years later. You look back and say, you know, if I had decided to go work on that team of, there's 3 of us that were baling hay that summer, I wouldn't have met Jerry. I wouldn't have seen his work. I wouldn't have known about Oklahoma State. Nothing. I mean, that's life-changing. Just that one little thing.
And if you'd said no to the blind date.
Yeah. I would never have met Jerry. We wouldn't have had 53 years of marriage, 3 daughters and 12 grandkids. I mean, it's just, and if somebody hadn't said, you know, Gary, I think if you go over to the Wesley Foundation and talk to the director, you might be able to, I've heard that they're looking for somebody to live in the basement for free and take care of the building. I might not have made it through that year. I would have probably had to drop out second semester because I wouldn't have had enough money to go, but not having to pay rent stretched my dollar so that I could finish that year. I mean, it's just, I can think of many things. Little things. People that you meet that have such an impact on you later on in life.
But then you had control over making the contact to raise the roof idea. If you hadn't been proactive with presenting that idea, then
Yeah, that wouldn't have happened. I mean, I'm driving back from Stillwater listening to a sports talk show, and the guy says, you know, they think about building a new arena off campus. And what happened is I get back to the office and I've got this idea rolling around in my mind, and we start sketching it out. And I'm thinking about, you know, I think if we could do this and this and this, you ought to be able to expand that building and renovate it. And one of the guys in the office said, well, we need to test this with some other people in the room. We need a structural engineer, we need a contractor, we need a steel erector to sit in here with us and listen to this and see if they see any gotchas, something that makes this thing not realistic. So we pull that group of people together. Well, one of them, the people that we invite, is a guy named David Arnold with Abholtz Construction, who had just moved, set up an office in Tulsa. They were an Arkansas firm primarily, but they wanted to move into Oklahoma, so they had an office here. We were doing a project with them in Broken Arrow. And David Arnold's at the meeting, and he listens to this, and he says, you know, Terry, you've got to go show this to Terry Dunn Phillips. Well, Terry Dunn Phillips had just been hired by the OSU to be the new athletic director. And he was an assistant to Frank Broyles, who was the athletic director at Arkansas. And he was finishing up his law degree, and he couldn't move to Stillwater to officially become the AD until he got his law degree finished. And so I told David, I said, well, I'd love to, but I don't know. I don't have any idea how to get a hold of Terry Dunn Phillips. And he said, well, my wife is the daughter of Frank Broyles, the AD. Frank Broyles is kind of a who's who of Arkansas athletics. So I said, really? And he said, yeah, she can set that meeting up. So he said, we'll just go over there some Sunday afternoon and you present this to him. Well, I mean, what's the chances of that happening? So his wife sets the meeting up with Terry Dunn and his wife, Harriet. We go to Bentonville, sit down at his kitchen table, and I show him what I'm thinking. And he loves it. He said, this is exactly what we need to do. We don't want to move into a new arena west of town. Are you sure this can be done? And I said, yeah, I know it can be done. And that's when he said, well, we got to keep playing games and wrestling and all that stuff. And I said, we can make that, we can do that. So then he comes back over here and talks to Dr. Halligan, and Dr. Halligan loves it, and then the regents buy into it. And then, you know, the rest is history. But yeah, there's just, that's what life is, you know. It's just, you don't realize it until you get to be my age sometimes. But these kids that are making these decisions now are making life-changing decisions. And some of them are pretty obvious which direction you need to go. A lot of them are just not that obvious, but they still are life-changing.
You had done your homework and were prepared for that discussion too, that sounds like, with figuring what questions they might ask. Was that something your firm would do, just come up with that idea and play it out and then maybe not have a customer at the other end?
No. This was highly unusual that we would do something like that, highly unusual. Typically we would have a client.
That's what I was thinking,
But I learned from that, sometimes you have to create a project.
Opportunity, yeah.
Yeah, you see a need before some other people do, and you start developing that prior to anybody else understanding that there is that need. But that's pretty rare for us. We typically have people come to us and tell us that they want to do something and they're looking for an architect, and would we be interested in pursuing that.
Well, over the course of your career, do you have a favorite project? Not those two, but some other than the OSU related ones?
You know, that's it's really hard to say, but because we've done so many fun projects and we have so many great clients, but there is another one that really sticks out as being kind of special, and that's the Coleman Theater in Miami. That was really in horrible condition back in 86 is when I think I first got involved with that, and had a local group of citizens in Miami that knew that if they didn't do something pretty quick, that the Coleman Theater was going to have to be demolished. It was in horrible shape. So somehow they got my name and asked me if I'd come up and look at it and help the city evaluate whether it could be salvaged or not. And so I went up there one afternoon and toured the building, and I just told them, I said, you know, it needs to be preserved and renovated because it's such a beautiful structure. It's got so much history and tradition, but it's going to take a lot of money, you know, a lot of time. It's just a massive renovation project. Heating and air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, life safety. The roof was almost caved in, had holes in it, and rain would just pour in. I said, you know, if you've got the time and the money, it can be done. But it took them almost 15 years, little by little, project by project, to get there. But it's really, really nice facility.
I've been in it. It is really nice.
It's neat to go there and listen to them play that pipe organ. Listen to it, watch a silent movie or something. So again, part of history that has been preserved. So that's always been, and really one of the things that made it special is just working with that group of people and see how dedicated they were to making it. They just wouldn't give up. There was a druggist up there named Willie Osborne, who was kind of the ringleader of that group. And neat guy. He's passed away, so his wife's still alive, but he passed away a few years ago. And he just was determined to see that building renovated, preserved. And he did, but it took a lot of work.
Well, you've got your fingerprints over various places in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I've been.
We're glad you crossed the Mississippi.
Yeah, I never thought I would. I never in my wildest dreams expected to spend my life in Oklahoma, west of the Mississippi River. I mean, we lived in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, I didn't live in Mississippi, Tennessee, North Carolina, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, all up and down that east of the Mississippi River for the first 16, 17 years of my life. And then since then, it's been west of the Mississippi.
Easy to call Oklahoma home?
Oh, yeah.
Home.
Yeah, it's the first home I ever really had.
Did your parents come to graduation? No. Had they crossed the Mississippi back? They crossed back over by the.
They did eventually. They moved from Sand Springs. The next time I heard from them, I enrolled at Oklahoma State that fall, and I think before Christmas they had moved to Las Vegas.
Further west.
Yeah, they went out there. They were building a highway from Las Vegas to Reno or something, and he worked on that. And then they wound up in California for a few years, living out there. And which really makes sense because you're in construction work. If you live in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, in wintertime, it's horrible. In spring, it's rain. So I don't know why they didn't do that a lot sooner. But anyway, they eventually retired back in Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
And that's where that's where my brother was living. So they went back there, and my dad drowned in a boating accident in Alabama. and my mother passed away at just old age back there. So,
But they got to see both sons graduate from
they
college
did.
and make.
Yeah, and they were proud that we did that. It just wasn't something that they had experienced. They just didn't realize.
Part of the times too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people my dad's age I know that didn't finish high school. They went to World War II, came, and they had to go into the military or had to work to make a living. It's hard times. And I don't know that a lot of people in the 40s and 50s really had the opportunities. It wasn't just assumed back then that you were going to go to college. The big deal was to get out of high school, I think. And if you made it out of high school, that was a big deal. If you had a high school diploma, that was a pretty big deal, the way I remember it. I mean, that's how I felt about it. I felt like if I got my graduate in high school, that was huge. But I think it was about the 60s, late 50s and 60s that college became more and more of a track that people wanted to jump on.
It was the GI Bill after the World War II that got a lot of them started. From, if I remember history correctly.
No, you're right. Getting the GI Bill was huge.
I guess you could have gotten that to get your master's, maybe. Could have used. I don't
I
know.
don't
If you
know.
could use it for an advanced
I
degree or not.
know I used the military to help buy our first house.
Okay.
I don't know about education.
You may have had to choose.
I probably did.
Between the two.
I don't remember how that worked. But we bought our first house when we got back from Germany.
And you were there in 68, 60, no.
66.
You got out in 68.
Got out in 68.
68.
Yeah, we actually I was in Germany for like 14, 15 months or something. And she was there almost a year of that. 11 of the 15 months or something. We loved it. It was good. Got to see a lot of Germany and France, Switzerland, Austria.
And she had some German heritage.
Yeah.
Too. It was a good option.
That was neat. Actually, her folks came over and stayed with us for a couple of weeks while we were there.
Did you propose to her while you were in college?
Yes.
Was it on campus somewhere where you
No,
the
it was in
question?
Bartlesville at her home.
Okay.
I went up there some to spend time up there, and I didn't have a car, so I hitchhiked everywhere. Had a bicycle, but I would hitchhike to Las Vegas from Stillwater.
How long would that take you?
It
A
depends.
couple of days.
It depends. I can usually do it within 24 hours.
She'd be afraid to do that now.
Oh, you wouldn't even think about it now. But I didn't think anything. I hitchhiked all over Alabama and Georgia. If you didn't, you didn't have a car, it was hard to get around. But I never thought anything about it.
Well, how would you do dates then?
We just
Double
walked.
dates or
We walked everywhere.
stayed in town?
Yeah.
Well, then how did you get to Bartlesville?
Hitchhike.
Hitchhike. With.
Now that was a little tricky. It's not direct, not a lot. But people would pick you up.
Back in
I didn't have any trouble. I didn't have any trouble. I had a couple of weird encounters that weren't very, tried to forget about, but I hitchhiked thousands of miles.
You just tell me you're an OSU student and people be nice.
Sometimes. Most of the time they pick you up and want to know where you're going, and you might chit chat a little bit, but I was usually more interested in knowing about them than they were knowing about me. So, but yeah, that was good. And then we just had I had some interesting experience. Hitchhiked when I was I went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. And I would hitchhike from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to, I only did it once, to a rest stop right before you get to Tulsa. She was going to meet me there, and I was going to get off the bus and then go to Bartlesville for the weekend and go back she would take me back to Fort Leonard Wood that Sunday night so I could be there, checked in. And the bus driver didn't want to stop. He said, I'm not stopping until we get to Tulsa. And I said, well, you got to stop. My wife is waiting for me at the restaurant. Must have been around Claremore, best I can remember. He said, no, I can't stop. It's against the regulations. I can't stop this bus till we get to Tulsa. And I said, well, how am I going to let my wife know that I'm not going to be able to meet her there? I don't even know how to. There's no way I could let her know. They didn't have cell phones or anything. That I'm going to be wound up in Tulsa, and she's going to be sitting out there in the middle of the night. This is at night, pouring down rain. I said, well, here, I'll make you a deal. You don't have to stop.
Slow down.
Slow down, and I'll jump off. And he said, I can't do that. And I said, well, you got to do it. So he did. He slowed down, and when we got to the rest stop, he slowed just enough that I could jump off. And she was there waiting for me, and the bus kept going. But I mean, we've got some crazy stories. But I was always a risk taker. I mean, I just always assumed, and she's not. She's very, very much a conservative as far as not taking risk like that. We're totally opposites. I just assume we can do anything.
Oh man, that may be attributed to moving 35 times.
Yeah, it could be. That
Started
could have something to do
yeah.
with it. Could have something to do with it. But it's been an interesting life. Our faith has played a huge part in that. I know people don't like to talk about that. It's not politically correct sometimes, but
I can see how that could play into creating the memorials.
Yeah.
I mean, you want
Yeah.
the spiritual side of that too.
Yeah, it's just without that, our marriage probably wouldn't have survived, or who knows. I mean, talk about decisions that you make. For me, that's the biggest one. It's because without that, I don't know what would have happened. It would have been, the train would have gone off the tracks many, many times and never gotten back on, I don't think. So I owe a lot to God, who's really just looked after me. And even when I've made bad decisions, it's usually turned out to work out okay.
Well, was that part of your childhood? Was
No.
church? No, that came later too.
Yeah, the Wesley family, when I lived there, it was kind of like, what's this all about? And I didn't have time. I was just pedaling as hard as I could to get through school. And then I'd come back there and I would clean up and whatever, and then go study or whatever. So I didn't really have time to get involved in the Wesley Foundation and what the students were doing there. But it did make me aware that, there's something going on here that's kind of neat. I need to find out what that's all about someday. Actually, I'll say this, you can cut it out if you want to, but the first time I ever had an encounter with anything spiritual, I was like 5 years old. And I don't remember my parents ever having gone to church. We didn't have a Bible. We never talked about anything religious or spiritual. And this one Sunday morning, and prior to that, I had never, life was a lot different back then. Parents, fathers, and mothers, a lot of times didn't show a lot of affection. Sometimes they didn't tell their kids they loved them and all that kind of stuff. So I had never heard my parents tell me that they loved me, or anybody ever tell me that they loved me. But I just knew that there had to be somebody out there that really cared about me. There's got to be. Why else would I be here if there wasn't? And so that Sunday morning, we got up and they said, we're going to go to church. And I didn't even really know what church was. So we got dressed and we went to a Methodist church in downtown Decatur, Alabama. I can still see it. And went down in the basement for the kids program. And when I walked into that classroom, the kids were singing, Jesus Loves Me. And so I said, well, that's who loves me, Jesus. Jesus loves me. But I don't know who he is. I have no idea who Jesus is. But I remembered that, and I could always go back when something was going awry. And my parents didn't get along real great, and there were a lot of issues within the family. That's part of why we moved all the time. But so I knew when things were off track and not going well, and I'd be laying in bed, I could say Jesus loves me, so everything would be okay. But then I didn't do anything with that for a long time, and it really wasn't until we got back from Germany, we had our first child, and I told Jerry, I said, you know, I don't know anything about being a father. I don't know anything about being a husband. I don't have any role models. I've not been taught. We need to figure out, I need to find out how you do all that stuff. And we read a book, and I say, you know, these books, they change. Every 5 years somebody comes out with a different philosophy. We need something that doesn't change. And so the guy I was working with was going to church in First United Methodist Church in Tulsa. And her best friend was going to that same church. So he was trying to get me to go there, and her friend was trying to get her to go there. And so one day we just said, well, let's go to church. And we said, where do you want to go? And I said, well, Lee's trying to get me to go to First Methodist. She said, well, Elizabeth, her friend, that's where she goes. So I said, well, let's go try it. And when we did, we walked in there and we knew this is what it was all about. This is what had been missing. This is the missing piece. And the pastor, they had a associate pastor that was family life guy that worked with young married couples and families, who was awesome. And he did a lot of retreats with men. And then there were women retreats where they would go talk about marriage and raising children and all that kind of stuff. And that became our home. That's where we're still members there. After all those years, that would have been 77 or 78 or something. So that was
47 years.
That was life-changing. But we started the book that we knew we could depend on and rely on was the Bible, and it doesn't change. We try to change it, but it doesn't change.
It does not.
It's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so culture changes, but the Bible doesn't. And, you know, it hasn't been perfect. We obviously made a lot of mistakes and done things we could like to go back and have a redo, but that's what grandkids are for. They're the redo. So.
Well, you've had a lot of good highlights.
Yeah.
Good highlights.
So it's been good. It's all good. I don't know. That's pretty much it. I can't think of too much else to tell you.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot. I usually ask, my last question is usually how do you want to be remembered? How do you want people to remember Gary Sparks?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know. I think probably it's somebody that just cared about other people and how to, I don't know how to say it, I guess, but what can I do to make this, my family and friends and people that I know, inspire them to become all they can be, and to realize that the most important thing that they can ever do is have a great relationship with the Creator. And that'll solve a lot of their problems. A better relationship they have with God, I think the better decisions they're going to make and the better life they're going to have. If I can help them understand that, see that, appreciate that, then I will have done what I was supposed to do, I think. That's why I was here. All this other stuff is just fluff. You know, the real essence is where you're going to spend eternity, and try to guide people in that direction.
Yeah, and if someone says you can't, try it anyway, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, I don't know, that's with the grandkids now. I mean, that's been a lot of my focus, is just making sure that they understand that there's a lot of decisions they're going to be making, and try to make good ones. So.
Well, you made a good one coming to OSU.
I did.
What do you think it is about OSU that sparks, not playing on the word, sparks such loyalty?
You know, I don't know. I think it's a tradition. I think it started, the roots of however this university started as a land grant university. I think people that started this place, it's in the DNA. And you may not know that when you get here, but when you've been here a while, you know it's a special place. People really sincerely care about each other, I think. And they, I don't know, it's just that I think there's a loyalty, that loyal and true. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just, I just have to believe it was the founding principles of the university. Without their knowing it, they instill that in generation after generation after generation. I hope we can continue. I think the other thing is the leadership. You look at the presidents we've had some outstanding presidents that reinforce that. Our leaders, our regents, a lot of them have reinforced that. You look at some universities that have gone astray of their original roots, and they've had poor leadership. They've brought in people who didn't honor and understand and support that, what the essence of what it's all about. They've tried, I mean, you look at Halligan and Burns Hargis and all the way back to Bennett and all those guys, they got it. They knew what was important, the mission, they stuck with it. Nothing could get them off track. They stayed on point. And I mean, look at, and you know, this is being judgmental, but look at Stanford. Their band, I mean, I don't know if you've kept up with that or not. They played it, we played them in a Fiesta Bowl or some bowl game. We went to I can't remember all that stuff. We've been to so many bowl games, but it was embarrassing. Just the stuff that they were doing on the field. Their band was just, and OU had the same experience when they played them. They were derogatory, they're making crude stuff. I mean, you won't see that at OSU. You would never see that kind of disrespect from our team, whether it's athletics or whatever it is. I mean, we're not like that. It's pretty special.
It is, and in that respect, kind of explains the memorials too. That
Yeah.
I want to read.
I mean, we want to respect, we want to honor people who have supported the university, that have given back. We want
The Cowboy family, what you said earlier.
to, it's a very, very, very unique, special place. And it's unfortunate that somehow you can't give people that tour the campus as they're visiting and trying to make a decision on where they're going. But have them see that within a 2-hour tour. How do you get that? Or you can't. But I do think some people sense it when they arrive on campus and they spend 2 or 3 hours here, or a day or two here. They sense there is something different. And a lot of people reject the university because they don't want to be a part of that too. It's not for everybody. And if you don't want to come here, that's probably okay, because you probably wouldn't fit in. But I don't know about it now, but when we were in school here, they had the Greeks and you had the Cowboys, and they get along. It's all one big family when it comes to supporting university, the football team, basketball, whatever. They have their rivalries and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's all about being a Cowboy, Cowgirl, and an OSU.
And that really shines through for homecoming.
Yes, homecoming
really
is the
all out.
Of expressing that.
Yeah.
And you look at some of the people that are graduating here, whether they're military leaders or Garth Brooks is a great example. Look how humble he is. I mean, you can't find a celebrity anywhere that I know of that's any more humble than Garth Brooks. Just a class act. And he supports the university. He's proud of being a graduate of here. Wears t-shirts that say OSU on them, sometimes, whatever. He's proud of being from Oklahoma and being a graduate of Oklahoma State. But we've got a lot of people that have gone on to be very successful in whatever. And they always speak highly of their time in Stillwater at OSU. Yeah. It's a great place to be. You're very fortunate that you get to live here and work here and spend every day in this great environment.
And to meet people like you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know about that, but thank you.
I think so. So we'll end on that, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming today and sharing. It's been
You
great.
bet.